NIL Now with Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
If you want to learn more about name, image, and likeness, you need to go to The Source. The NIL Now podcast from Headline Studio and Reddit highlights the biggest storylines with comments from key guests in the college and high school NIL space.
NIL is not a cherry on top. It needs to be thought about as a part of these young men and women's future to, further their careers. You should be able to leave college with something.
Subscribe to NIL Now on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Exactly 1 week from the day that we recorded this podcast, the Bengals will be on the clock in the NFL draft, a day that everyone, including the Bengals, have been waiting for. And we heard from the Duke of Cincinnati himself as he lays out what we might expect or what we might not expect to come in the draft next week. And when I say Duke of Cincinnati, I'm talking about Duke Tobin. Welcome into another Strictly Stripes pre-draft edition of the podcast. Muhammad Ahmad joined by Andrew Gillis. Mike Neislick has a day off. He will join us on Friday to do our mock draft, which should be an exciting one. I'm looking forward to that. Our final draft as a Strictly Stripes unit before next week. But before we can even talk about making a mock draft or anything of the likes, obviously, we had all these questions going into this week, entering, next week's draft of, do we have a better sense of where the Bengals are going in the first round? Is there sort of a position they're prioritizing now that they've already made some additions at tight end and at, offensive tackle and safety? Could they maybe make some sneaky picks? Are there some needs we're not talking about that maybe the Bengals are thinking about? What does Joe Mixon's future look like? I mean, there's so many things we could talk about that we are going to talk about, but I think you want to kind of start with sort of where things are right now with, kind of just the veterans that you want to extend for next year, the fourth-year starters, Joe Burrow, Logan Wilson, and T. Higgins. We heard Duke Tobin in Indianapolis at the Combine the last time he talked. I mean, he said bluntly, if you're looking for T. Higgins, go find your own wide receiver because, they're not going to trade him. So, there was no bluff there. It really showed like, okay, yeah, T. Higgins is a priority. And like he said today, they are trying like heck to lock down Wilson and Higgins and Burrow. Now, here's the thing. We know how he feels about Higgins. Burrow is Burrow. But, is it – I don't know. I feel like is it bluff to say that, he thinks they can keep – whether it's done this year and or next year or a combination of both. Is it realistic to say that you want to keep Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Logan Wilson? Or do you really think, there's no bluff and, he actually wants to get this done?
Well, I don't know. Bluff is probably the wrong word. I think he wants to get it done. I think, he made mention a couple of times today that, you want good football players on your team and you want to keep as many of them around as you can. And I mean, that's obviously not breaking news. That's not anything new. Every general manager in the league is going to say that. But yeah, I mean, he was pretty guarded with kind of the way that he answered everything from the draft to questions about Jonah Williams to everything. There wasn't really, there wasn't really like a, kind of a whoa moment of the presser that was, everything was pretty formulaic. There wasn't a ton of that. So, to me, I think it's not so much a bluff as it is him just not wanting to commit to anything because obviously in any world you want to keep T. Higgins and Logan Wilson. The argument for, one of those guys leaving has never been, you can do better. The argument has never been with T. Higgins. Maybe you can improve at the receiver position if T. Higgins is gone. You're going to get worse if T. Higgins leaves. That's not like a shocking thing to say. I just think right now you've got Burrow coming up. You got those three coming up on a contract that you mentioned, and you want to win in 2023 and there's those guys are going to be a part of the team. And there's just not really a benefit to saying, oh, well, geez, guys, it's going to be really hard to keep all three of them, but we're going to try it. No, there's no benefit to that. You don't want anybody thinking that, there's something rotten in Denmark. You want everybody to think things are great. Things are good. Hey, we're going to try and keep all these guys. We're going to lock them in because the alternative is saying, hey, we'll listen to anything. And then all of a sudden the narrative starts, oh, well, maybe is T. Higgins on the board. you don't want that. You want to shut it all down. I think that was the way you kind of have to do it. It's not exactly the most exciting news conference in the world. It's not exactly the most exciting answer, but I think that's just the way you kind of have to approach this type of thing.
Well, I don't mean to say that, like, does he actually mean it? I guess what I'm saying is, like, does he actually believe that could happen? Like, he's going to say that just as any general manager in the NFL for any team is going to say that. But, like, do you think he actually believes that, like, they can do it? Because, like, think about Logan Wilson. Like, if you're looking just based on market value, I know we talked about this, like, before free agency and after the season was over, like back in February, and I wrote about this. But, like, if you're going to pay Logan Wilson something fair, like his market value, like you're looking at $9.4 million per year, which is basically like, I'm just guessing if you're his agent, you're looking at like maybe trying to get a 3-year, $28.5 million deal. I mean, that's going to make him a top 30 paid linebacker, which, I mean, linebackers aren't necessarily the richest commodities, although I think that's changed kind of with like the deals that the Bears gave to like Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. But I mean, even then, like, that's a lot of money. And I think, it would be idealistic to, try to keep him, try to keep T, but like, can you pay T 20 a year? Can you pay Logan Wilson 9 a year? Can you pay Joe Burrow? Well, you can't. I mean, will you pay Joe Burrow the 51 a year with everything in regards to that? Like, Joe Burrow's going to get his money, whether it's 48, 50, 55. Like, that's not the concern. The concern is, are you going to do that, shelling out another $29, $30 million for Logan and T? I mean, we don't really know what the Bengals cap will look like in 2024 or beyond because we just haven't gotten a sense of what's going to happen with Joe Burrow, which is why I think, like, the good thing is if and when we find out, like, Joe Burrow's deal, like, when he gets extended, which, again, we could presume is this offseason unless they want to delay it to next year, maybe do the 5th-year option, who knows, because he's a first-round pick. I don't know, but, like, I think if you figure out the cap space for Burrow's deal, like, we know what's going to happen with Jalen Hurts through those 5 years. Like we saw the details Adam Schefter released. So now you can look at the Eagles and say, okay, maybe they can do this with this guy who's up in 2023 or this guy who's up in, in 2024 or this guy who's up in 2026. Like, I just think we could talk about this forever and ever, but like, we just really don't know. If I'm in a world where it's like, oh yeah, you're paying Burrow like a discounted rate of like $50 million just under what Jalen Hurts is making, then yeah, absolutely, you can keep T. Higgins. I absolutely think you can. Logan Wilson is a toss-up, whereas if it's like $55 million a year for Burrow, then it's like, yeah, I would think Logan Wilson is going to be in like a Jesse Bates situation where maybe they tag him, maybe they don't, they let him walk, or you just have some kind of fallout. Not fallout, that's the wrong word, but like holdout, I should say. But I mean, like, do you think that like he's just going to kind of like let one domino make the others fall? Like, do you think he's going to focus on Burrow and then let that domino take care of the rest?
I think you kind of have to. I think, he said at the combine, Burrow could be first, could be last. They've like he was guarded there, he was guarded today. I think again with Burrow, you could do it. If you look at Jalen Hurts' cap number, for the next 4 years, you see the figure that he got, 5 for 255, and you go, oh my God. And you see the cap numbers and you kind of start to go, what in the hell? How does this
what
make
incarnation?
Sense? Don't ever say that again. We're but yeah, like you kind of start to get a little confused by that. So, maybe there's something there. I think there's pros and cons to doing it either way, to getting the biggest fish kind of under wraps and saying, all right, Burrow's the guy. Here's what his numbers are going to be for the next 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever it is. And then kind of working around that. There's benefit to, saying, okay, we've signed these guys for this long and, now we know what the cap is going to be for this, there's benefits to both. So we'll see. I think I would try to get Burrow done first and then kind of go from there. But we'll have to see.
Burrow is the face of your franchise. It goes without saying. But I think if you're in a situation where you want to try something tricky and maybe get T. Higgins down first, well, what happens if that limits you in some ways where it's like, Burrow might want a certain number and you're trying to go a little bit underneath that? Then you're in a bind. And so if you do it the other way around where you focus on Burrow first, then you have more wiggle room to negotiate with T, because let's be real. Like, I hear what you said about T leaving, making the team worse. objectively, yes, they will not be the same without him, but is T. Higgins that good where, like, you cannot replace his production, like, in the draft? Not this year, I don't think, because this is not a good year for draft class wide receivers. No disrespect to Jackson Smith and Jigba and other receivers. But, I mean, like, let's be real. It's not what we had with Jamar Chase or with Justin Jefferson or, you know, even Higgins, who was drafted the same year as Jefferson, around apart. Like, it's not that. I don't think it's that situation where, you know, what I'm trying to say is it's not the end of the world if for whatever reason you can't keep T. Like, I think he is replaceable to an extent. There will be drop-off because, I mean, obviously it's going to take time for a new guy to come in and have the relationship with Burrow Higgins has, like Chase has. But I don't think T. Higgins is a guy where, like, you lose him and it's like the world is falling apart and the world's coming to an end. You know, so I think it'd be wise to focus on Burrow and then just hope that you have enough cards in your deck to kind of lay the hand you want with Higgins and Wilson. But then kind of looking at, you know, the other veteran who I think, you know, I probably should have mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. Obviously, that's Joe Mixon. You know, I know you and Mike talked about his situation with the aggravated menacing charge, which he pled not guilty to in Hamilton County Court on Wednesday. And, of course, he has another court hearing coming up, I believe, sometime in early May. I forget the exact date, but while that case is still going on, you know, the draft is a week away, and Duke Tobin didn't rule out picking another running back in the first round. Like, he basically said, we're going to pick anything and anyone except for a quarterback, because you have Joe Burrow, obviously, and a specialist, unless you really think there's a Sebastian Janikowski floating in there somewhere. But that's disrespectful to Evan McPherson. In all seriousness, though, I mean, the door's open, whether it's Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, or anyone I'm not thinking of. Like, they could do it. They could pull the trigger in the first round, and if they don't, I almost think you definitely pull it in the second or third round. I mean, like, let's think about it like this. There's going to be a running back picked. We can almost guarantee that. But if a running back is picked in the first or second round, regardless of the legal situation that's going on with Mixon, which obviously we need to see more happen with that, like, regardless of that, you know, does that almost mean that his job is in trouble? Or do you think they're going to just basically get someone to compliment him and then see how he does in 2023 and then decide if it's worth cutting him after that?
Well, I think, you know, today told me nothing about the future of the running back position for the Bengals. I didn't get the sense that, you know, there was any kind of material change. Like, nothing about what I thought going into the day changed. I thought that, you know, Joe Mixon, you know, it was kind of on shaky ground going in. You know, I wrote a story about that today, you know, where it was, hey, look, you know, there are some numbers on the field where they've started to take a dip. You know, his cap hit's really high. You know, he is starting to get a little bit older. There's a lot of evidence there. And the Bengals, frankly, I mean, like you said, they need a running back. So I don't think anything really changed today. You know, it'd be different if there was some kind of leading quote where, you know, you could kind of infer that there were decisions, you know, that were ongoing or anything like that. But, you know, there was nothing like that. It was very generic. So, you know, nothing, like I said, nothing about what Duke said today told me that there was an imminent change. I think it still kind of is what it is. It's going to come down to the draft because this team wants to win in 2023. And I know there are a lot of people out there who, you know, think that Joe Mixon's washed or think Joe Mixon is whatever. And, you know, I think the pendulum might have swung the other way where, you know, Joe Mixon is still a serviceable NFL running back at the very, very least. Like, no matter if the Bengals release him, he's going to go somewhere and get meaningful touches. So, you know,
I don't know. I actually don't know how I feel about that. I somewhat disagree with you there.
I just think that I don't know. I just think that, you know, wherever you go, like unless he's backing up a Jonathan Taylor or a Bijan Robinson, you know, like, which I don't think he would sign there in those cases, you know, but like unless he's going to back up somebody, like he's going to get the ball wherever he goes. It's just a matter of, can the Bengals get better cheaper? And I think that nothing to me fundamentally changed.
But do you actually think, like, let's say there's a situation where, like, we've reportedly been seeing that, oh, you know, the Bengals are expected to offer him a pay cut, and if he says no, then the door's basically right there in his face. Like, do you actually think other teams would call him and say, hey, like, we want to offer you this and that? Like, I know this might sound crazy, but I don't think other teams would want him. No, I mean, like, think about that.
Teams
think about
win.
Like, well, here's the thing, though. Like, let's be real. First of all, we don't know the situation of his legal case. Now, He could be cleared of that. He could beat the case. We don't know what his defense team is obviously going to do. That's a whole nother conversation. But, like, let's say he doesn't get the result he's looking for in court, and, like, he's got that hanging over his head. I mean, there's a possibility of a suspension there. Like, this is if. This is a hypothetical. If he's found guilty of something and the NFL looks at that and says, yeah, I think we need to put a suspension down. I mean, what if they do that and then he's not even in Cincinnati? Like, do other teams want to take a chance on that? I don't know. I mean, that's a real possibility.
The legal argument aside, I like if I mean, obviously, because like you said, that's a whole other conversation. But I think, you know, if everything clears itself there, he's going to play. Like, he's good enough.
I still don't know if he does.
He's good enough to play somewhere. Like, he's good enough. You know, there's a really valid case that he's not, you know, a true number one anymore. That, you know, he's not going to be a top 5 running back in the league. He's not going to be a top 10 running back in the league, whatever. But so many positions across the league, you know, have 1A, 1B kind of situations. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example here. Like, I mean, you're telling me that he can't go to Dallas and spell Tony Pollard. Like, Tony Pollard would be the one, but Joe Mixon can handle carries there too. You know, you're telling me he can't go to Tampa and back up Rashad White. Like, you know, there's options there. And, like, you know, Joe Mixon, like, there are flaws. He's not a great pass blocker. You know, you don't really want to put him in when you need a block out of the backfield. You know, he's not a Samaje Perine there, but again, I still think he's good enough to play. And the fact of the matter is the Bengals are not going to cut him, or, you know, they're not going to risk, you know, kind of him moving on if you don't know that you're going to get, you know, significantly better play. Just because Mixon's a known quantity. And if you bring in a rookie or, you know, rookie, and then, you know, you bring in a rookie and you sign a Kareem Hunt or something, you sign a Leonard Fournette or a Zeke, like, you don't know that tandem is going to be better, I think, you know, with the rookie. So it all just depends. But no matter what, Mixon's going to play somewhere next year.
Well, here's the thing, though.
Legal issues aside, I should say.
Here's the thing, I don't disagree with any of that. I think he is more than capable of backing up all those guys and all those teams you mentioned. My concern is, like, this is where you have to go back in time. I think this is what some people forget because it's been 6 years. Like, when he was in the draft in 2017, obviously, we all know he was the most polarizing, controversial player in that draft with, you know, his situation that happened where he assaulted a girl, you know, at the University of Oklahoma. 4 teams had him on the board. I mean, the guy was arguably the best running back in the draft, one of the best players in the draft, and only 4 teams had him. I don't think those other 28 teams have forgotten. I think they've seen how much better he's gotten and how good he was and the Pro Bowl numbers he put. But I still think that, like, I'm not going to try and get in these GMs' heads, but, like, you don't think that they, you know, haven't moved on from, like, you know, the polarization that he brought in that draft? I think some of them are still scared to, like, deal with the baggage of, like, the things that he did. I mean, because, again, this is not holding anything against Mixon. This was, you know, a long time ago, but I think some GMs are still weary of, like, having a guy like that on their team. Do you think that's a stretch, or do you think there's, like, a case to be made there? Because I think some teams might be worried about that.
The current stuff is what would scare teams away. But again, like, if you can play, you can play, and if you can help a team win, you can help a team win. And I think he still can. So, you know, to me, as long as there's not anything current going on, I don't see it being an issue for him being on a roster in 2023.
When we come back, we're going to spin things forward and look at what the draft will look like, how the Bengals' strategy may or may not change, and why that's the case, plus much more to come right here on the Strictly Stripes podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Dave. When you need money in a pinch, Dave can help. It's a banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly. No interest, late fees, or credit check. Join the millions already using Dave to get financial relief and sign up for an extra cash account to get up to $500 instantly. Go to dave.com/Spotify or download the Dave app now. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC.
All right, and thanks for staying with us on the Strictly Stripes podcast. Meant to mention this at the top of the show, but make sure you sign up for our Strictly Stripes newsletter. It is free. It is in your inbox every morning, and it is easy to sign up. You just go to cleveland.com/newsletters, and you click on the Strictly Stripes newsletter. Again, it is free. You get all of the insights and reporting from me, Mike, and Andrew in your inbox on the daily. It's easy and it's free. Cleveland.com/newsletters. And Andrew, I know with all of the action going on with, the draft coming up in a week and all of the things from Duke Tobin that we've been talking about so far on this podcast, I know that you've been really filling in our subscribers on subtext through our Cincinnati Football Insider Service on everything happening, everything going on. Why should fans sign up for Cincinnati Football Insider, especially with the NFL draft coming up in a week?
Yeah, go to cleveland.com/Bengals, strictlystripes.com. You're going to be able to sign up for that. It's very cheap. It's not going to cost you a lot of money. You can cancel at any time, so don't feel like you're going to be roped into something. But again, it is a really nice service in order to, with Twitter kind of breaking down. I mean, how do you know if I'm the real Andrew Gillis now without a blue check mark?
I lost mine too.
Yeah, that this is the real Andrew Gillis sending you messages, and the real Muhammad Ahmad and Mike Nislik. You're going to get a lot of good stuff from the draft, from free agency, to our thoughts on where the team is going, what the team has done, and kind of where we think things might head. So, yeah, it's a great time to sign up. The draft, you got rookie mini camps, you got all kinds of voluntary workouts going on. So if you want to get some, get the news first, it's a great place to go.
Indeed. And speaking of news, I guess like Andrew said earlier, really nothing like jaw-dropping, from
really
Duke
nothing
Tobin
in general.
I mean, hey, love Duke Tobin, hate Duke Tobin, man. That's just the way it goes. I will say this about him though. If you're like on the flip side of what we do and you're him, he does a really good job of like staying guarded and not giving anything away. Cause like you think about like Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager, I think he said this like way back a few months ago, and he was like, something along the lines of, I'm just glad we're not bad enough to draft like a Jamar Chase or something like that, which kind of like turned some heads of like, wait, what are you talking about, bro? So no, Duke Tobin, he's been doing this for almost as long as I've been alive. I'm 25. He's done this for 24 years. So he knows what he's doing. And that's why he has his own strategy in mind, to where he kind of talked about it today. And he was saying that the approach, without giving away too much of their strategy, obviously, their approach with rounds is interesting. They don't look at it as like, okay, second round, we're going to focus on running back. Fourth round, we're going to focus on safety. Sixth round, we're going to focus on linebacker. Like, they don't look at it like that. The way he implied it was basically like, not only is the door open for anything in the first round, which I want to get to with tight end and offensive tackle, but like beyond that, let's say you get to the second, third round and your best player available is a safety, or one of the best available is a wide receiver. Like, the way he implied was that you're not going to completely rule that out, I mean, do you think that approach makes sense? And like, if so, do you think that maybe sets like a new precedent where they finally draft a D lineman in the first round, where maybe they finally like draft a position pretty high that they haven't drafted very highly like in the last decade or so?
Well, the defensive line point that you just made, I think that kind of goes in contradiction with what he said. He made the point, nothing's off the board for us. And I think that is, I'm not going to say it's lip service, but it is something that every GM says. I think you really kind of see at the end of a draft, where things actually, kind of happen, because, if the Bengals end the draft, with all of a sudden you look at their 7 picks, let's say they do make 7 picks, you look at the board and, hey, wouldn't you know, they have a running back, a tight end, a tackle, a corner, a safety, and a backup quarterback, and however many that was, I wasn't keeping track. If all of a sudden the positions that everybody said, they got this edge rusher early and they got this DB or whatever, all of a sudden magically those positions get filled. That could just be a coincidence, but it also just could be, kind of the way the board laid out. So, a GM is always going to say we want, the best player on our board. Because, if you say that you want the best player on your board, then, it allows you that opportunity to say, okay, this guy was truly the best player on our board, and we really like what this guy can bring us. So, this is that time of the year where, the GM talks and you listen, and it's almost on you to try and figure out, what he means by something, because like today, he was pretty guarded with everything, he talked about, kind of taking best player available approach. And I think, you're not really going to know much more until you hit until you hit next week.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, we can kind of look at their historic trends. Like I said, they haven't picked a D lineman in the first round since Justin Smith, the Cowboy, in 2001, before he actually became the Cowboy. And he kind of said, like, maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's not, but I think that's his way of saying, like, yeah, we don't really believe in that. Because, like, let's be real. Like, if they really wanted to, we're talking 22 years and since that draft pick, they could have easily picked a D lineman if they wanted to in that span in a first round, setting. They did Carlos Dunlap in the second round. They got Geno Atkins in the fourth round, who ended up being one of the greatest players in team history. I mean, obviously they haven't shied away from drafting, D linemen and drafting them high, but I don't know. I just wonder, like, it raises the bigger question, like, people say this isn't your dad's Bengals or your grandpa's Bengals. Like, are we going to see, like, the team kind of bucking trends and, like doing things that they haven't normally done or haven't done at all in the draft? I don't know. But again, as guarded as he was, I think, in my opinion, that does open the door to, like, maybe getting a Kalijah Cansey, who's, spoiler, I had him in my latest mock draft, which I'm going to have coming up on Friday. I had him out of Pittsburgh as a first-round pick. We've had Mozzie Smith as our first-round pick in our mock draft we did with Mike last week. I think you've had Mozzie Smith in there. Mike has had Brian Breesy from Clemson, which I don't think is crazy. Like, I don't think those are crazy options, and I don't think it's going to be crazy to see them, like, draft a wide receiver in the third round. Like, I know Mike was like, oh, that's crazy to even waste capital on that, but, like, what if you get to the third round and, like, Jaden Reed is there and you feel really good about his slot production? I don't think that's the worst pick in the world. Like, if he's the best player on the board and you really think that you're not going to keep Tyler Boyd past 2023, which I don't think is even going to happen, I don't think that's crazy. It might be crazy to, like, people like Mike, for example, but, no disrespect to him. Maybe he's listening to this, but, like, I think we can't guarantee anything like you said, but what we can say is, based on what we've seen and based on what we know, it shouldn't be surprising if, like, we're not going to see a jaw-dropping pick like I think we saw with Dax Hill last year. That was a little bit jaw-dropping that they were, going to pick him that high, even as the Jesse Bates fallout was kind of playing out. But I think we might see something where it's like, oh, okay, so maybe they weren't feeling tight end, or they weren't feeling tackle. But that leads to my next point of, and this is, I think, actually what kind of, certainly narrows down some of the options in the first round. One thing he said was that, they're past the days of, drafting guys that are like, 3-4 year projects. Like, you're at a point where it's like, look, you have one contract with these rookies. It's a 3-4 year deal. Maybe you get a 5th-year option if they're first round pick, obviously. But, like, after that, like, you don't want to invest a second contract in a guy that you think might finally reach his potential. Like, you want guys who are going to win now. Like, I probably should have mentioned this earlier in the podcast, because I think it goes to show, like, to the point Mike has made on this podcast, like, you want guys who are going to win now. You don't want a guy who's going to take a year or two to develop. I mean, maybe a year at best, but no more than that. Like, you want a guy who can win now or win within, like, another season. So, like, when you think about guys like Anton Harrison, guys like that who, might feel like a project pick, or maybe even DeJuan Jones. Like, I know I've said DeJuan Jones is a win now guy, but maybe they don't see DeJuan Jones as a win now guy. Like, do you think that automatically eliminates, like, some guys off the board for the Bengals in the first round? Or do you think that the term project is subjective? Like, maybe if it's 1 or 2 years, it's fine. But if it's, like, a guy that you're not sure about, then it's like, no chance.
Well, so I asked Duke this pretty much exact same question, and part of his answer was, quote, the days of long-term development, looking for guys to produce 4, 5, 6 years down the road, that doesn't happen. We want all of our players to have a role when they come into the building and grow into that role as best they can. You only have 53 and you only have 48 dressed on game day, so that you want everybody in the mix and have a role and be ready to go, end quote. So, again, I just think, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, because they drafted Dax Hill last year, and again, it's just, you're at the point of the year where I guarantee you, at the post-draft press conference on Thursday night, when we talk to Zach and Duke and everybody, one of the things that they're going to say is, oh, well, this is the highest guy on our board. And I mean, I think I can remember one instance of a coach very publicly saying we reached for this guy, or we wanted somebody else. And I think it was Urban Meyer. They wanted Kadarius Toney, and they ended up with Travis Etienne. Which actually probably worked out better for him. But, I just think, you're at the point of the year where a GM and a coach are never going to say, oh, well, we were hoping to wait for this guy, or we had to reach out. Everybody's going to be the best player available, whether or not it's true or not. I just think that, it's hard to take too much stock into kind of what you get from these type of things.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, like, like you said, it's tough to say, but I don't know. I mean, obviously, it all depends on, like, what do you consider a project? Like, what do you consider a win now guy? Like, maybe someone looks at Anton Harrison as, like, a winner. Someone might look at him as, like, not even a first-round pick, like, not even worthy of a first-round pick. So it's tough, and it all kind of just goes down to, like, sort of, what happens in the war room on, Thursday, Friday, Saturday next week. And then, they've had a lot of the same coaches for, like, the last couple of years. So, obviously he acknowledged that, like, having Brian Callahan, Lou Anarumo, Zach Taylor together for going into 5 years, like, makes a difference. Mike Potts, who's, like, one of the biggest brains behind, their scouting and, drafting strategy. Like, he's played a big role for quite some time in Cincinnati. And I think that's a guy that we should definitely consider talking to sometime if he's, available, if we can, make that happen. I think that's a guy that would be interesting to kind of pick the brain of, because he knows, a lot of what Duke knows and vice versa. But it's tough, obviously, because, like, those guys are probably just as guarded, if not more guarded. But, there's one other thing kind of, well, I guess it does go hand in hand with the draft, but it's also a little bit separate. And, there was an interesting thing that he said that really stood out to me. I think you can talk a lot about this, because he was asked about, signing Sidney Jones to a 1-year deal, signing Terrell Basham to the short-term deal that he got. Your Ohio Bobcat guy that you covered. I mean, what was his deal again? Was it a 1-year deal?
Basham was a 1-year deal.
So Basham's a 1-year deal. So Jones is a 1-year deal. Eli Apple was a 1-year deal when, he came in 2021, and he was a 1-year deal when he re-signed. Like, Hayden Hurst, 1-year deal. Like, you look at this trend of 1-year deals, and it pretty much confirms what Tobin said of, like, they look at themselves, like, the Bengals look at themselves as a market where it's like, hey, come play for us, put a jersey on, and because we're such a good team, if you play for us and play well, then you're going to get a good deal. And he said this word for word, a la Hayden Hurst. And that gives away right there. The team is so confident in itself that they look at it as, hey, we won't give you a long-term deal, but because we are such a marketable place, you come play. It's like a recruiting pitch. Like, you come play for us, you're going to go anywhere you want after that. Like, give us 1 year of your life. Give us the best year you've got, and we'll take you anywhere. It took Hayden Hurst to Carolina. Eli Apple was a different story, but, like, if he actually played well, it could have taken him to a lot of other places if he wanted to. If he wanted to be a starter elsewhere, like, who knows? If Sidney Jones, like, starts for Chidobe Awuzie, depending on his recovery, then, he plays well enough, either as a backup or starter, then he maybe gets another prove-it deal somewhere else, or he gets a little more money somewhere else. Same with Terrell Basham. Maybe he gets a better deal somewhere else, even though he's been with, like, 5 different teams. I mean, like, do you think that's a sustainable way to go? Like, do you think that's an approachable way of, like, just keep bringing guys in on short, cheap deals? Or do you think maybe there's some risk to that?
You don't want to major in that. You don't want to be, you don't want to be the team that, because the reason you're doing that is because you don't have a kind of a long-term answer at that solution, or at that, you don't have a long-term solution at that position, excuse me. So, the reason you'd be doing that is because you want or you don't have like a tight end. If you draft a Michael Mayer, if you draft a Dalton Kincaid in the first round, the goal would be, hey, look, now we don't have to do this anymore. Like, we're good. If we're bringing in a guy on a 1-year deal, he's a depth piece. I don't think it's what you want to do. I think ideally that's the case, but in today's world, you kind of have to do that, at least to some extent. You're going to have to do that every once in a while, because you're not going to hit on every draft pick. So I don't know. I don't think you want that to be the marketing point of your team, but I think you need it kind of in your back pocket to use when you need, next offseason, you might need a receiver. And then, hey, all of a sudden this team is one of the most marketable operations in the sport, because who wouldn't want to go play with a receiver or a quarterback like Joe Burrow? And, you kind of see that across the league with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and the Bills and Josh Allen. I think, teams like that kind of have different marketing abilities that, a team like, I don't know, let's pick an example here, but the Texans,
Patriots with Tom Brady.
Texans, yeah, something like, no, I'm saying like a team that's bad. Like, you can't, you can, maybe market a rookie, but that's obviously different than saying, come play with Patrick Mahomes, come play with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just crazy because, like, he wasn't cocky when he said that of like, oh, we're a really good team, or like, you'd have to come play for us on a 1-year deal to prove you're even good. No, he was saying it like, look, if you need to, like, prove, if you want to show the league that, like, you got what it takes, it's kind of like he was treating, like, I don't know, I'm trying to find a way to say this where I'm not like being misleading. Like the way he talked about it was like think about these college coaches who are like looking at the transfer portal. Like you got these guys who are like, you know, third, fourth year players, seniors. Like you're looking at grad transfers. Like, look, you're a grad transfer. Give us the best year you've got, and like you're gonna go be a first, second round pick. Like maybe Nick Saban. I'm hypothesizing here. He talks to these guys and says, "Hey, come play for me for 1 year." 1 year. Like Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs came. He was a 1 year wonder, and now he's probably gonna be a first, second round pick. Could be a Bengals pick. Like if I told Jahmyr Gibbs, like, "Hey, give me the best year of your life, and I will take you anywhere you want." And maybe Duke Tobin is looking at it like, "Hey, come play for us for 1 year. And even if you don't want to stay, that's fine. We'll take you wherever you want after that. Because, hey, best case, you're great. We got a year of production out of you, like with Hayden Hurst, who was a big part of the run to the AFC Championship. Or worst case, you're Eli Apple, and you speak for yourself in that sense. I won't go further. And, you know, you reap what you sow at that point. But like you said, though, I think it's a balanced approach. Like you can't bank on that too much because obviously, like, you want to have continuity, which is why I still think, like, you can't rule out a Michael Mayer. You can't rule out a Dalton Kincaid because – I mean, Irv Smith, we don't know what he's going to look like. Drew Sample, I mean, does he stay healthy? We don't know. I mean, that's a big question because he's been hurt a lot in his career. You have depth for now, but, like, you want to have a guy who you know will be there for at least 3 years on a rookie deal. I guess technically 4 years. And then if you want to keep Smith or Sample, that's great. You have more long-term continuity. And then after that, you need one more body. That's fine. Like, you can't keep them all, obviously. So, yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I don't think it's a bad approach, but I think you have to take it with a grain of salt, like anything you do. But yeah, I mean, you know, what a way to wrap up the month of April. I mean, we got the draft next week, and then pretty much after next weekend, we're in the month of May, which means summertime. What's the Will Smith song? I haven't listened to his stuff in a while. It's like summertime or something like that, right?
I have no earthly idea what you're talking about. I have no concept.
I don't know what I'm talking about either. I don't even know what this podcast is about anymore.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It's not that serious.
I have no idea what that song is.
So then let me ask you this. Do you have any idea of like what your ideal summer looks like? Like, let's say, you know, we get through, you know, these workouts that they've got going on.
Anything outside. There's really nothing better than like a Saturday when it's not too humid in like June or something, and it's like 8:30, 9 o'clock, and you're just like sitting outside at like a brewery with your friends, and like there's like a plate of nachos in front of you, or like one of those like hot pretzels or something like that, where you dip in like 8 different kinds of mustards and cheeses with like a bunch of beer. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Nothing beats that. So looking forward to doing that. That would be wonderful.
See, you know what's so funny about that, though? What you described is like one of the most Cincinnati things you could do. Like, you know, you think about it.
That's just a summer thing you can do. That feels
no. It is. I mean, whether you're in California or New York, it is. But like, I'm saying, think about this. I don't know if you know this, Andrew, but I didn't realize this till 3 years ago. Apparently, like 3 years ago, there was some poll that said that like Cincinnati's like the #1 city for drinking, which doesn't entertain me because I'm Muslim and I don't drink alcohol. But I'm just saying, like, you combine that with the fact that like you have like Bavarian pretzels because of like the heavy German Catholic culture that's, you know, part of Cincinnati and like the Northern Kentucky area. Like, pretzels are a big thing around here. Like, you won't find any shortage of like, you know, breweries with like pretzels and beer, which again, not my cup of tea, or I guess in your case, a cup of beer, glass of whatever. But like, that is like the most Cincinnati thing ever, which is not a bad thing. I guess if that's what you like, good for you. But I see, for me, like, obviously I'm coming from a very different and sheltered mindset of like, I don't know, my ideal summer is like you mentioned, the weather. It's not too humid. It's a nice day in June, maybe even May, to be honest. And I don't know, for me, it's like going to like an ice cream shop. Like Grader's Ice Cream is a very popular ice cream spot in like Kentucky and Ohio. It's very, very, very popular in Cincinnati. Like, I imagine myself at a Grader's or at, there's a place, actually, you should try this. For anyone who's in Cincinnati that hasn't heard of this, hear me out. There's a place between Over the Rhine and Clifton, basically north of downtown, called Pendleton Parlor. This place, I kid you not, serves ice cream and cookie dough, like together. Like, you can get ice cream cookie dough or cookie dough ice cream, however you want to phrase it. And it is out of this world. I have not been there in like forever because I don't eat out a lot. And with Ramadan, I don't eat out at all. And actually, funny enough, today's the last day of Ramadan, so I guess I'll have an opportunity to do that next week. But yeah, I mean, like, you got to try that out. I mean, like, does that sound pretty good? Chocolate chip, like, cookie dough with, like, vanilla ice cream?
Never been a big cookie dough guy.
Really?
Yeah, never.
I don't know.
Never been my cup of tea.
I just love, like, I don't know. It's like this mentality of, like, oh, I'm literally eating cookie dough. Like, in a normal world, like, I know everybody likes to lick the cookie dough batter. Like, when your mom's making cookies and you lick the bowl, like, people look at you like that's weird. But then when you're, like, actually eating the dough itself, like, not the little bits of it that won't make you sick, like, the actual cookie dough itself, it's like, yeah, you're, like, not bold, but also, like, bold at the same time, like, if that makes sense. Like, you're doing something unorthodox, but it's also, like, not crazy because it's not going to kill you or make you sick. But, man, yeah, that sounds like my ideal summer is, like, you're sitting in nice, not-so-humid weather, eating cookie dough ice cream. And, heck, I mean, if the Reds are actually somewhat decent, which we all know is never going to happen, I mean, if you could, like, do that at a Reds game, maybe instead of, like, the ice cream cookie dough, you have, like, some Dippin' Dots, like Dippin' Dots at a baseball game. You ever had Dippin' Dots before? I think those are pretty good.
Yeah, they're fine. I'd prefer regular ice cream.
I think Dippin' Dots are nice if you're in, like, a certain environment. Like, if you're at a baseball game on a nice summer day, like, yeah, Dippin' Dots aren't as good as a good regular ice cream, but in that situation, I would have no qualms about that. But, man, I was going to say, like, where do you like to go in the summer? Like, if you had to, like, visit places in the summer, like, where do you like to go?
Places I haven't been before.
Okay, where have you not been that you want to go?
Well, this summer, I'm trying to think. I'm going to Louisville. Haven't ever been there.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not from here. I'm not from here.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. See, I'm from here, so it's normal to me. Yeah,
Louisville.
right.
Yeah, never been to Louisville.
It's Louisville, by the way.
Louisville, whatever.
Louisville.
Gonna do a bourbon tour. That'll be fun. I'm trying to think what other places I'm going. There's talk of New York City. I've never been to New York City, so
I've only been there once. I liked it, but it was too overwhelming for me. I'm a very extroverted person, but like settings like that honestly like drain me. So the inner introvert inside of me likes to be in like places like Cincinnati where you're not too big, but you're not too small. But I mean, if you've never been, I think it's a place to like take off your bucket list for sure. I do want to go to LA one day. I've never been to LA. I've been to San Francisco. LA's nice.
I really like LA.
Yeah, my cousin was just there for a business trip last month. He said it was pretty cool. He went to like Santa Monica, Orange County, which obviously is a little bit different, but it's like all in the same area. That'd be kind of cool. So I lived in Montana for a year, and like I went to Glacier National Park. I went to Yellowstone National Park. I want to go to some national parks this summer. Like I heard Yosemite in California is pretty nice. So if you don't want to go to like LA, but you want to go to California, that'd be pretty dope. Big Bend in Texas. I think it's like western, like El Paso, Texas. That sounds pretty cool. Have you been to the Smoky Mountains before? That's actually, I grew up going there a lot. Have you been to the Smokies?
I have not.
Believe it or not, Smoky Mountain National Park, I think last year or the year before, was the most visited national park in the United States, which blew my mind. I thought it was going to be like Yellowstone because like you got these iconic fake TV shows basically over-exaggerating it, and then you got like the other places I mentioned, but yeah, I mean, Smoky's a treasure. I think it's because like you can literally drive through there and like not have to pay anything because you got to pay to go to those parks. You could just go to Smoky Mountain National Park whenever, wherever. Just don't get mauled by the grizzly bears, and hopefully, you don't run into a cocaine bear. You smiled. You knew I was gonna go with that. You knew I was gonna pull that out of the bag, out of the hat, whatever you want to call it. I don't even care at this point. Yeah, summer is definitely my favorite time of the year. So I just was thinking about that, and I was like, what is the ideal summertime for Andrew Gillis? And for those who don't know Muhammad Ahmad's ideal summertime, well, now you know. Well, tomorrow we're going to give you our ideal mock draft, our last joint mock draft before next week's NFL draft. Make sure you tune in. Mike joins us again as we put that together. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then next week we're going to give you everything you need to know, last second thoughts before the NFL draft. But once again, for myself and Andrew Gillis, I'm Muhammad Ahmad. We'll see you Friday.